Welcome to the Earthworks Podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Got a familiar face on with me today on a Saturday. We're going to do the podcast. Our schedules just didn't seem to mesh, and so we talked to each other and said, hey, let's try this on Saturday. But I've got Dave Wilber back again. He called me, so this will be interesting. We're flying without a chute here and don't have really an outline or anything. He says we're going to riff like Joe Rogan, so I don't know what that means, but it's going to be fun.
You don't watch Joe Rogan?
Yeah, I love Joe Rogan. I love
okay. All right. Well, good.
Yeah. Welcome. Thanks for joining me on a weekend.
How are you, old friend? You know, I was thinking about this Saturday thing. Like, I used to get so much work done on Saturdays.
Yep.
You know,
and, as the superintendent, I always went in on Saturdays because none of me called me.
Yeah.
None of those pesky salesmen called me.
Yeah. Right. Well, it wasn't just that. I don't know. It just there was a rhythm to the weekends.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and
that's when you did your live streams, wasn't it? Typically.
What's that?
That's typically when you did your live streams. Them.
Yeah, I mean, what I still have that habit. I mean, it's been how many years since 1992 since I stopped growing grass, that I still have the Saturday habit to get up early and get some work done. So when I was doing those live streams, it just seemed like the natural thing to do. Is do it on Saturday morning.
Yep.
And I tried to do it on a couple of weekdays, and it just didn't flow.
There's a piece about the weekends, I think, that kind of allows you to focus a little bit better.
Yeah, and I understand. I mean, I remember a superintendent telling me one time, I don't want to work on the weekends anymore.
Yeah,
I'm done working on Saturdays, and I think a lot of that had to do with family commitment and and just a lot going on in their lives. And I never had as much of that, so I didn't. It didn't pull me around.
Yeah, no, that's true, and there's a rhythm to the Saturday morning prep that probably doesn't require the superintendent to be there, and might be a good opportunity to, get the assistant's feet a little bit wetter in the process.
Well, I think in my early superintendent day paranoia, I couldn't sleep anyway because there was that, did they all show up kind of thing.
Right.
And if they showed up, were they all sober? And or did all the equipment start because there's no mechanic and stuff like that. And so I was awake. I mean, I might as well pull the shoes on and go in.
Just go in and take a lap around. Make sure.
Yeah, sitting there thinking about it anyway.
Yeah.
And I always
you get the scowls from the assistants and what are you doing here? You weren't supposed to be here, and they want to be alone.
I told those guys, I said, listen, it's your show to run on the weekends. Don't pretend I'm not here.
Yeah.
If I need you or we see something or you need me, we'll reach out. But otherwise, I'm a ghost.
Right.
And and quite frankly, I spent a lot of time with, member management on Saturday.
Yeah.
So, which is one of the things we wanted to, look at the segue.
Gosh, we're good.
Things we wanted to talk about.
We must have the same birthday or something. There's some kind of a connection there.
Did you guys know that Kevin and I share the same birthday?
And a bunch of people. Carrie Hoffner, I think, is on our list, right?
Yeah, we start putting it out there and start finding out all these people.
Yeah,
plus famous people like Mick Jagger and
That's right.
Yeah. So it's a thing. Whatever was going on.
Absolutely. So let's get into it. So one of the things that has been on both of our minds, and I don't joke about this because it's a serious issue, but if I get 10 minutes on the phone with a superintendent, it seems like, I say this a lot, that about 8 of it is, about 2 minutes is agronomics, and the other 8 minutes are some kind of a mild counseling session, because it's always been a stressful job. So many of the things that superintendents deal with are completely out of their control, whether it's member expectation or weather or whatever. But I think the pressure of increased play, decreased budgets during COVID really put some guys on the ropes, some people on the ropes, and in particular, I think some of the committee expectations nowadays have really have really put a lot of undue pressure on superintendents. So let's talk a little bit about that and maybe how to navigate some of that stuff.
Well, I think I was thinking about this last night, and not that I make notes or anything, but I was just thinking about what our conversation could be. And I think not to delve into old guy stuff too much, but I think when I was coming up in the business, social media wasn't a thing.
Right.
Texting wasn't a thing.
Right.
Cell phones were just becoming a thing. And the pace of communications was so different, the pace of information. And
the volume, right? I mean, the volume of it. Yeah, it was one thing at a time, basically, or 3 or 4 at the most.
And so, my communications process was, I photocopied a lot of articles and put them in people's hands, things from various trade magazines,
right,
or whatever. I would typically write a note, like a cover sheet kind of thing, and say, you might be interested in this because, we're talking about bunkers or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. And here's the thing about bunker sand. And it goes in everybody's box. There's no email. There's no,
right.
I had a great copy machine in my office. So, make copies. It stapled on its own. It was great.
There's some 30-somethings right now that are looking at their headphones like a confused dog right now.
And I could control the narrative in so many ways, because of that.
Right.
If there was talk around the club about whatever it was, trees, bunkers, whatever the thing was, you go find the information, or you develop the information and you get it out to the right people, and it gets out to the right people, and that's done. And I think at the time, the Superintendents Association, there were a lot of people that were good communicators that way. I was thinking about Dwayne Patton, who was at Lawrence Country Club, and one of the early founders of Turf Bite. There were a whole bunch of us that were kind of information junkies. We were getting information from each other, just starting into that world.
Dial-up modems and
yeah. But what I saw was a common thread of people who were engaged in I hate to say the word spin, but they were controlling what was going on and how it was going on. And I think somehow we kind of missed the boat.
And you're talking specifically within their respective clubs.
Yeah, within their clubs.
Yeah.
And I think somehow, I don't know if it was denial of technology. I remember going to a technology meeting that GCSAA put on, and they were thinking about getting in bed with CompuServe, and it was hugely expensive, and it wasn't going to work. And the World Wide Web was just coming, and I was one of the voices. John Scott and I were two of the voices that were saying, no, this is all going to change.
Yeah.
And we saw it coming. And I don't know that our business necessarily embraced, caught up with, got ahead of. I don't even know if we're really ahead of it now, as far as the pace of information.
Right.
And the way that information gets to people, started getting to people, completely changed. And it was no longer okay to make copies and stick them in people's boxes.
Right.
That wasn't happening.
Right.
And I remember some years later, Thomas Bastis and I were talking when he was the superintendent of the Cal Club, and there was just too much talk running around his club about too many things. They were in the middle of a renovation, and there was just the air was just full of bullshit, to be quite frankly.
Right.
And I'm like, Tom, you got to control this. And so, I remember it was Constant Contact, was the software platform that he got started with, and he was great with it. He embraced that right away. It's like, okay, I can get everybody's email address, and I can put stuff out.
Right.
And I can put it out to the masses. And his boss, his GM at the time, was a really good guy, but was old school, very old school. Was like, you can't do this. You can't just be, you just can't be emailing all the members. You know what? We don't do that here. And it's like, and I remember talking to him. with Thomas and saying, but we have to.
We have
there's just too much talk here.
Well, and I think one of the things that you get in the thick of battle, and I think one of the things that superintendents forget, because they've all got a vested interest in the property,
Right.
but I think what they forget is they were hired because they were the best person for that job. They're paid.
Right.
They're paid. By and large, they're paid well. They've been given a lot of the resources required to do the job. But the bottom line is, you were hired because you were the best candidate for that job at that time. And so playing defense, and don't get me wrong, I was as guilty as anybody of playing defense, but playing defense just shouldn't make sense. You're the expert on that grass, and taking an offensive stance, not offensive but offensive, is critical to your survival. Like you said, control the narrative.
And then I remember we were talking about this, and I think we've talked about this on the podcast before, but I'm sure there's people that haven't heard this. But we both had a mentor in our world,
mm-hmm.
who gave us some really, really good advice. And I remember before I was going to my first private club job, talking to Armin Suni, and I, how do I do this? How do I survive this? Because I just watched him survive over and over, and he just thrived. And his number one piece of advice is, you got to find the naysayers. And don't necessarily think of them as your enemies.
Yeah.
But you got to find the ones that that always have something to say, whether it's in the bar, in the pro shop, whatever. And you gotta be the first one to talk to those people. Those are the ones that you have breakfast with on Saturday morning.
Yeah.
Those are the ones. That's the group that you drive up to when you're out on the golf course.
Yep.
Hey guys, how's it going? That's the ladies club captain who who you have to go schmooze a little bit.
Who's convinced that your entire staff stops to stare at her golf swing, right?
Right. Right. Who knows that you only mow on Thursday mornings.
On Thursday morning,
yeah. And it was great. It was such great advice, because I ran into that guy almost immediately.
Yep.
The guy walked up to me and started spewing about all the stuff that my predecessor had done wrong, and what a messed up golf course it was, and I thought, this is the guy. This is
that's the guy Armin warned me about.
This is what Armin told me about. This is the guy. And over the years, I've seen that guy
at every club,
everywhere.
Everyone.
Right?
Yep.
Or 10 of those guys.
Yeah. I was just going to say, if there's only one, you consider yourself lucky.
No, he had friends.
Yeah.
He had friends.
And they're going to work their way onto the committees, because they want what they want, and they're going to do what they need to
they were the ones at the board meetings. They were the ones.
Yeah.
I remember one of the most uncomfortable moments I've ever had as a young person, because we're talking, I was 24.
Right.
When I got my, when I was in my first private club situation. And I don't know exactly how it ended up, but that guy that we're talking about, Mr. Brownfield, I've written about this guy, invites me to a cocktail party that he's having. And it wasn't really a cocktail party as much as it was like a booze cruise, because there was a lake on the property, right?
Okay.
So it was he and a bunch of people on their big ass pontoon boat. Okay.
And this sounds like a setup.
That was a total setup, and I walk, and so this thing is happening at sunset, right? Kind of deal. I'd had a long work day. I'm thrashed. I put on a clean golf shirt and go to the booze cruise, and I haven't eaten much or whatever. The guy sticks an old fashioned in my hand. Oh, that tastes pretty good. Might have another one of those. And then all of a sudden I turn around and I'm just getting grilled. I'm getting grilled. These guys, I'm surrounded by them and their wives. and I'm just like, wow. And I'm sort of feeling the effects of the booze, and I'm thinking to myself,
looking around for a life jacket. Maybe I can swim back to shore right now.
Well, and Kevin, you know me, and especially in my 20s, I mean, I just didn't, you know, I don't have a very good filter,
Right.
you know,
Right.
it's not like I have a temper, but I just, you know, at a certain point, it's like, why do you care? That was my whole thing. It's like, why do you guys care?
Yeah.
You know, you've reached a point in your lives where you can do something like this, you know, where you can go out on the boat and, you know, drink booze or whatever. You know, I've been working all day. You guys played golf this morning.
Yeah.
You know, why do you freaking care about what I'm doing? You know, what does it matter to you if you get a bad lie? You know,
because you're gonna get something different tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that.
I just couldn't understand the degree of you know, everybody says, well, the retired people don't have anything to do or whatever. But some of these people were like business people and stuff, you know, that were like, you know, they were up from San Francisco on the weekends kind of deal. And I'm like, what? And I'm just thinking to myself, you know, you own a car dealership. Why do you care about bunker sand? Like, you know, there's no sand in our bunkers. You know, that was the big one. And I remember sitting there and it was so uncomfortable. And I just wanted to jump off the boat, or I wanted to drink another 17 old fashions and just completely get in the bag and just, you guys don't know shit, you know. And, you know, talk about anxiety, you know, for me, it was just, you know, it was high anxiety. And
so how did it end?
You know, it ended with me, with me making absurd jokes and trying to kind of get him to shut it off. You know, I didn't really, I really, looking back, I didn't really take advantage of me. You know, what I should have done is I should have had my talking points, like Arvin always talked about. There's 5 things you want people to know.
Yep.
And I should have hammered those points, you know, hard, held court for a minute.
Yeah.
And then let it go. But, you know, and so it's like, okay, you know, that made me realize, that moment made me realize that I had to, if I was going to survive this job, if I wanted to survive the job, you know, I had to find those people that were saying complete bullshit and change their minds.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Or at least get them to the point where they know that, you know, A, you care, and B, you, again, going back to what I said earlier, that you're the expert they all hired. Maybe Jim didn't have a say in who they hired, but you know, the consensus said that Dave Wilber was the guy. And you know, I had a conversation with the superintendent this week that, and he was just looking for advice. You know, what do I do? I got this unruly committee that I'm dealing with, and you know, one of the things I said, whether it's right or wrong, I think it was right, because he kind of admitted that he had done this before and kind of had let it slide. But I said, you know, you get the committee out on the golf course, because that's your, pardon the pun, but that's your turf. That's where you're at your best and you're comfortable. And when you get into the boardroom or you get into the ballroom or wherever you are, you're not in your element. And so it's, you know, or you get on the pontoon boat with some old fashions. That's not your court.
Yeah, I couldn't control that scene.
Yeah. And he said, he kind of paused. He says, you know, we used to do that a lot and we haven't done it lately. And I said, well, maybe that's something you got to plug back in. And, you know, the young superintendent here in town just got promoted this last year. And I thought this was brilliant. He and the pro, you know, and again, that's a whole
other world.
That's an unfortunately, too many times it's an unfortunately adversarial relationship, and it can't be. It just can't be. No. And I don't care what the guy's like. You have to know. You have to make sure that he knows that the two of you are in lockstep with each other. Otherwise, it's going to be monumentally more difficult. But the two of them developed this thing called Super Tuesday. Okay. I said, well, what's Super Tuesday? He says, we have a sign-up sheet and members can sign up to play with the two of them on Tuesdays.
Okay.
And
wow.
And I said, well, how did it go? He says, didn't have a single sign up all summer. But I said, okay, mission accomplished. You offered it. Nobody took you up on it, but at least they can't say that you didn't offer to be open and transparent. And I think that's a great, and going back to the comment or the conversation I had this week, the superintendent said, man, I just don't know if I've got time for that. I said, I'm not sure you don't have, you don't have time not to do it.
Yeah.
Especially if you've got a committee that's running you ragged. I think those are things that you just have to make time for. And that's kind of the old school superintendent with the overalls and whatever, the Carl Spacklers. You can't do that at a private club. You've got to be in front of them. And that goes back to Armin's comment to me that we were talking about offline, and I pointed this out to him last week when we had him on the podcast at GIS. I said, that's the best advice I've ever gotten, when he asked me, how often are you in the pro shop? Yeah. And I said, boy, not very much, because it's not very fun. Yeah. And he said, he looked me right in the eye, and the two of you were there together. And he said, Kevin, they can't shoot you in the back if you're facing them. And that will always be the best advice I've ever gotten as far as member relations.
Well, and I think too, it's, the personality type, right, of golf course superintendent.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really realize this, because I know maybe I know a little about my personality type, but I mean, I'm a bit of an outgoing cat. I have curiosity rules my world. I just want to know about everything and everybody.
Yeah.
When I traveled, when I had time when I wasn't working, when I was traveling, I just wanted to go learn about wherever I was.
Wherever you were, sure.
Yeah. And so that makes it seem like that you're, gregarious and interactive and a people person, right?
Right.
Dave's a people person. Not really. I really had to recharge my batteries hard after being around a lot of people. It's not necessary. My curiosity overrules my people. I know genuine people, right? And they die on the vine if they're not around people.
Yeah.
My death on the vine is if I'm not learning, I'm dying.
But you're a curious introvert.
Right. And right, exactly. And there's actually, ambivert is the, I'm an introvert and I'm an extrovert when I need to be. But what I started to find as I was, doing consulting visits and starting to become a consultant, is there's this personality type of golf course superintendents, and it really is kind of an introvert kind of thing. Yeah. And it's an intellectual, and it's a multitasker. There's, I don't know. Yeah, I suppose there's things like Myers-Briggs and all the different, personality evaluation tools. And I think if you sat down and had 100 superintendents take this thing, I bet on the, on the graph, on the heat map, would come out that there's a lot of real similarities in personality type.
I think you're right.
And unfortunately, that personality type doesn't necessarily lend itself to things like being questioned about your decisions.
Yeah.
Because, listen, you think I haven't thought this through? You think I haven't seen those scars? Shit, dude, I see them every day. I live with it every day.
Yeah.
And you just want to look at somebody and say, you think I'm that fucking stupid?
Right.
That I don't see that? And, of course you can't do that, but you're projecting that energy.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to you. I don't need your advice. I don't need your questions. And I think, I started to see that over and over again with some golf course superintendents, and I'm like, listen, I know you can't change the leopard spots. I get that.
Yeah.
But you've got to figure out how to be approachable. One.
Yep.
But at the same time, you've got to control that, where that goes. So, I wrote about this in a blog post once, and it turned out to be something that a lot of people have told me is is a really good thing. Is you're on the golf course, right? And and Mr. Hammersmith comes up to you and he's like pissed. He's 3-jacked a bunch of putts.
Yeah.
He's losing to his buddies and he just wants a piece of you.
And you can feel the energy from 50 feet away.
The way he's walking up to you.
Yep.
Know how does he And so the more introverted problem-solving type superintendent will sit there and try to solve the problem with Mr. Hammersmith right there.
Right.
Instead of saying, "Hey, listen, I can I can hear your frustration, or and I want to talk to you about this, but I've got guys in the field, I've got a bunch of stuff going on. Can we meet? Can we meet in my office? Can we meet at the shop?
Right.
And this happened to me by mistake, but I had one of those kind of deals, and it was a super busy day, and I said, can we meet another time? And the guy starts running down his schedule, and I said, well, listen, I'm at work at 5:00. Are you an early riser? Yeah, I'm up at 4:30 every morning. Well, come to the shop.
Yeah. Let's ride around together.
Yeah. I roll in at 4:45. The guys come in at come in, have a cup of coffee with me, and we'll talk this through, right? Yeah. Whatever the issue was. And now I have the the power, so to speak, right? And you're in my world and you're at my time, and I've always said one of the most destructive things ever is the 6:30, 7:00 green committee meeting.
PM.
To 9:00.
PM. Yeah. PM. Yeah.
That just shatters people who have been up all day, have been grinding all day. And, I ended up doing a lot of those. I ended up inviting people to come with me, and there was one day when, I think somebody was out or whatever, and I ended up having to rotate and I'm like, hey, we need to talk, but I've got to change cups today.
Right. Come with me.
Come with me and we'll change cups. And here's a green committee member never seen a cup changed. I have no idea how that works.
And never heard that the radio's going the whole time and you're redirecting and you're doing all these things. Yeah.
Watching the whole show.
Yeah.
Right. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay. Dave gets it.
He's not just screwing up my greens just to make me miserable.
And he's not Mr. Green Jeans. And he might look like it sometimes because he's not afraid to get in the hole.
Sure.
If we have to. One of the masters of that. Did you ever meet Lou Tonelli?
No. I know who he is, but I never met him.
Yeah, so Lou was at the Lake Merced Club,
right?
40 some years, right? Yeah. And salty the earth guy at a Jewish club, salty earth Italian guy at a Jewish club outside of San Francisco, in a neighborhood where Olympic club's on one side of you, San Francisco club's on the other side of you, Cal club's down the road.
Yeah.
Harding Park's up the street.
Just a few notables.
Yeah, pretty tough spot.
Yeah.
Right. And Lou just handled that stuff so well. He was so good at engaging them, on his own terms.
Yep. Yep.
And I watched him so many times say, I can't talk to you about this right now. But at the same time, he wouldn't avoid that. Like he wouldn't say, oh man, there's Mr. Hammersmith. Let's make a left-hand turn and get the hell away from the guy.
Yeah.
I want to know what he's thinking or what he's saying.
Right.
But I want to know the glimpse of it. I'll talk to him. We'll have the talk later. And never in the clubhouse.
Yeah. Never. And I think some might misconstrue that as dismissive, but it goes back to what you said earlier. It's controlling the situation and the narrative. And
putting yourself in a position where you're this isn't mind game stuff. This is how business works.
Well, and I was just going to say that is Mr. Hammersmith would never accept somebody just barging into his office and spewing a bunch of nonsense.
No,
he wouldn't.
Of course not.
I'll tell you what, we could just stop recording right now because that's such a great message. You got to control the situation, no matter how fired up the member is.
It's business.
It's business.
And some some members need to be reminded it's business. It is, I know it's their recreation time or whatever, but hey, no, this is my business. This is my office. This is your property. I get it. It's your property. You're paying to be here.
Yeah.
You get to care. That's all good. But again, going back to that introvert personality type, right? So you have a bad interaction, with that golfer. And then what would happen to me, and I think what happens to lots of people, is then your next 2 hours are just jacked.
and you'll do anything to avoid him next time.
Well, yeah, that. And it's just like, oh, and your foot goes just a little deeper into the accelerator on the golf cart. You know what I mean? And or you drive off down that one path where nobody can see you, where you can just sit there and fume for a second, and I mean, I've seen all this stuff, right? I've seen it over and over. I lived it. I've seen it.
Yep.
I've seen it at high levels. I've seen it at the 9-hole trailer park golf course. It works the same way.
It's not unlike your relationship with your spouse or your significant other. If you fly off the handle right now, I can almost guarantee how the rest of that conversation is going to go, and you're not going to win it. You're just not.
No.
Last year I attended a conference, and one of the keynotes was a nationally recognized body language expert. And I didn't have much expectation going into it. And I probably didn't absorb as much as I should have, but it was a brilliant class. And one of the take homes, and it fits perfectly into this conversation. One of the take homes that, she hadn't dealt with golf related people in the past, but body language is body language. And if you're an expert, you're going to be able to figure out the situation. But as a group, along with the instructor, she surmised that your best opportunity, especially for men, and it's a little bit different for women in the industry, but your best opportunity is to have a guy next to you in your cart, so you're shoulder to shoulder, you're on your turf, and it's a comfortable situation for most men to not be facing each other, but to be more shoulder to shoulder.
Right. Yeah.
And you think about those opportunities with your assistant or a member where you're riding around the golf course, a lot gets done. Or a committee chair, or whatever it may be, or golf pro
manager, golf pro. Yeah. All of that. Yeah. I always wanted to put the GM on the cart with me.
Right. I thought that was really, really a great observation. And as you reflect back on your own career, you're like, yeah, those were some of the most productive conversations, because it's on your terms.
Yeah, and not necessarily ones that you expected them to be. And then suddenly the conversation would turn, and it's like, oh, we're getting something handled here, and then you'd hear that information coming back. Right. And like, oh, I just instructed pretty well there. I didn't even need to. I wasn't even trying to be an instructor.
Yeah.
Or a PR generator.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, man, I've been getting so many phone calls, because now golf, and I love it. It's funny because I use the term agronomic advisor more than I use agronomist now in my work, because like that advice part somehow seems to really fit. I mean,
it's better than 50-50, isn't it?
If I go back to college and get my psychology degree, then maybe I'll just be agronomic
consult or
psychologist. Yeah. But I think which I'm thinking about doing, by the way.
Yeah, those of you looking for a new major, that's probably the one.
The advice part of it is, so often was like you say, we'd have that quick conversation about, or not so quick, but we'd have a directed conversation about soil tests, whatever it is that I was there to do, and then the next thing was,
how you doing?
Yeah. Let's talk about whatever.
Yeah. Let's talk about you. We got the agronomics handle.
Yeah. But I think that the hardest one, and this is the one that's been coming up a lot lately, golf is back on its feet now a little bit, right?
Right.
COVID was over, and now we're spending exorbitant amounts of money on restoration, renovation. Big name architects
they're busy again
back in that stuff because there's not as much new stuff being built. So they're, so they love the, let's blow up the golf course and rebuild it, kind of work, right? Not picking on anybody. Those guys, you need to work, right?
Yeah, you got to go where the business is.
You go where the work is. And right now the work is, we haven't touched the club for 7 years, and we need to do some work, and and all these absurd ideas about master plan and different things like that come up. And I can see superintendents being behind the airplane, behind is like not quite keeping up, for various reasons, and a lot of it has to do with their staffs are smaller. Their whole position in the world has changed, and suddenly, the superintendent turns around and they're in the crosshairs. And they have no idea why. And now post COVID, and maybe in the new political world, I don't know, conversations sometimes seem to be a lot more brutal. And in the last year, I've had an easy guess, a dozen calls, Kevin, from some really good people telling me that basically somebody from the club organization, whether it be, GM, Greens chairman, golf chairman, whatever, has basically walked up to him and said, it's time for you to go. We just don't think you're the guy to get us to the next level, whatever it is, right? And here's a poor superintendent who has drugged these people, through all this bullshit,
the last 3 years.
Who has done it, hundreds of man hours a week understaffed.
Right. And pivoted every 10 minutes.
I talked about changing cups, I love doing course setup. I love changing, but when I was golf course superintendent, that was not my job. I had guys for that. I needed to be doing other things. I cannot tell you the number of, supers that tell me now that they're basically, they're out doing setup every day. Because they got nobody else on the staff that can really, or that person needs to do something else, and this is where they are, right? And I rolled into a golf course one day, and the golf course superintendent was just coming in, and he you want to talk about a Carl Spackler moment? He's on a triplex mower. He's got the cup cutter, the bucket.
Right.
You know where I'm getting at, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. This guy's, he's been out mowing greens, setting tee markers, cutting cups.
Probably got a couple done before the staff showed up so that he could come back in and set up the board, right?
I'm like, are you okay? No, dude. And he says, this is every day because I either can't find staff or we're running on, a shoestring or whatever. So now golf is back, right? And, and a bunch of these kind of shadier general managers, owners, whoever we're talking about have figured out, hey, Mr. Superintendent can run with a lot less. He can run a lot leaner than and then like a few months later, it's, I just don't think you're the person to get us to the next level.
Now let's ramp up the expectations and see what he can really do, right?
And it's like, how about we just punch you in the head? You know what I'm saying? Like, it just blows my mind. And the conversations, and I know you've had these. I know you have. And the just the bewilderment, in the superintendent's eyes, like, I just got them through the craziness. But
did they communicate that? Did they communicate that? No. And that's one of the things that, and I'm certainly not throwing rocks. I did it for 25 years. I don't want to throw rocks at superintendents.
No, because when you're that busy, you can't think about those things.
You can't. That's right. But again, going back to what we said earlier, you have to explain in the heat of battle what you and your staff are going through so that it doesn't become the norm, because then, like you said, when golf is back, now the expectations get ratcheted back up, where 2 years ago, nobody cared whether there was a bunker rake in the bunkers.
Right.
Now the bunker rakes are back, and we need to renovate the bunkers because there isn't enough sand, or whatever the the accusation du jour happens to be. It's crazy, and it's a hamster wheel that I see way too many superintendents on. And the other side of that coin, besides the GM or the committee chair saying, "Hey, I'm just not sure you're the guy." I think the more disheartening thing for me is to talk through things with superintendents that are 10, 15, 20-year guys, maybe not at the same club, but they're quality superintendents that know what the heck they're doing, saying, I don't know if this is the career I want to be in anymore.
Oh man.
And it breaks my heart every time we have that conversation.
That breaks my soul. Yeah.
And I partially because I don't know how to talk them through that.
Well, Kevin, what do you say to here's two of us, right? And, both used to be grass growers, now doing other things. Right. Maybe that's the progression, right?
Yeah.
No, it's not.
No,
it's not. And
not for everybody.
And, I cannot tell you the number of people who have called me and say, "Hey, I want to be a turf grass consultant. Tell me how to do it." And I go, "Yeah, here's how to do it. Don't."
Right.
Don't do it. And
right.
Like, what? You do it. And I went, yeah. And the amount of sacrifice, the amount of hardship, the amount it has been, for me, has been 10 times worse than when I was growing grass.
Yeah.
My choice to be an independent business person, to be on the road at squillion days a year. I mean, all those sorts of things, immense sacrifice. And I'm not trying to blow my own horn here. I didn't know it at the time. I just wanted to work hard.
Yeah.
And, I remember a guy talking to me one time saying, "Well, I'll just go get a sales job." And I'm like, how many of those do you think are out there? Like, you live in a town, right, where there's 120 golf courses.
Mm-hmm.
You can probably guess what I'm talking about.
Sure.
And then there's 4 turf grass distributors, well, I'll just go sell equipment. Really? Well, there's no jobs for that. Like, you're just going to, what are you going to do? You're going to call up the tour distributor and say, "Hey, I've decided suddenly I want to be," no, that's not how that works.
Yeah.
There's nothing of the sort. It's not the same scene at all. And by the way, that work is incredibly hard, as you found out.
Yeah. And the term hard. The dark side is I don't like it because it's just the other side, but it's as you can attest, spending 150 days a year in a hotel room is not as sexy as people might think.
No. So there's nothing cool about being on the road for a business like that. It's not cool.
I mean,
coolness to it. It wears off really fast.
It's the interactions with the superintendent and the turf managers that really make it work.
That's what keeps you. That's what makes it work.
Yeah,
Otherwise, I just remember being in airports sometimes, just honest to God, crying because,
what am I doing?
It's Friday afternoon. My flight just got canceled. I may not even get home till Sunday. I've got to leave again on Monday.
Yeah.
What the fuck am I doing here? And then, when my world became a little bit more local, when I was working with Sierra Pacific Turf Supply, I wasn't on the airplane as much, but it was just a different version of, of way too many hours on the road. I've spent, 10 hours doing whatever, and then I've got 3 hours worth of driving to do whatever.
Right. To go 8 miles in that.
So I don't, I just don't buy this. Well, I'll just, go do whatever. And I've had to have that conversation with some people and say, "Do you want to be a golf course superintendent?" And of course, when they're crushed, when they're getting their asses kicked, they say, "Well, not really. I'm sick of the business," or whatever. Okay, well, tell me what you're going to do. And the absurdities start coming out of their mouth.
Right.
And it's like, well, okay. And it's just such a sad thing because, I tell people all the time, like, this is all I know how to do.
Yeah.
This is all I know how to talk about legitimately. And then suddenly you're like disillusioned with it. And it's like, well, now what? I've had this side hustle of like, I put up some gutters, in my neighborhood for a couple of people. Maybe I'll become the gutter guy, or something.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't compute. and it breaks my heart, man. It breaks my soul. It's like, no, listen. And I guess what I wanted to get to with all this is, okay, so let's say you're listening to this and you're that person who, who has suddenly heard the winds start to blow that maybe they don't want you there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not over.
Right.
It's not over. You can get in there and fight and change that whole scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it may mean throwing some people, well, it may mean throwing some people who you've been kind of tolerating their stupidity and really throwing them under the bus.
Right.
And going to some, to some of the other influencers who are quiet but influencers.
Yeah.
And saying, Mr. Brown is harassing me and I'm done with it. And if this guy doesn't get out of my grill, we're going to have a problem.
Well, or,
that sounds aggressive, but it's like, this is the world that we live in right now. Direct, honest, kind of brutal communication.
Yeah. Wins. And another, I guess another resource, going back to my time at Desert Forest, another resource is to bring a Dave Wilber or an Armin Sooney in.
Well, I'm not here to do that, but you have to have some people in your court
to bring them in as a neutral third party and say, you got some members. I remember Armin saying this to the board of directors. You've got some members that are not being good members.
Yeah.
And he was very tactful about it, but the old saying, an expert is someone who comes from greater than 50 miles away from your property. Yeah. And so to be able to utilize somebody to be the heavy in the situation isn't a bad thing. That doesn't make you less of a superintendent. It just makes you pretty savvy.
No, and it doesn't make you less of a superintendent. And the other thing is I think the days are over. I'm trying to figure out how to say this politically correct. I don't know that there is a way. I think that back in the day, right, there were a lot of agronomy reports written that were kind of a little bit of fiction.
Right.
Mr. Superintendent is doing a wonderful job here at your property and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, and I just wouldn't write those things.
Right.
I from the very beginning, I wouldn't do that.
Well, Dave, your letterhead wasn't quite as valuable.
No, I didn't. My letterhead was more than 4 letters. So let's just get it to that point.
Yeah.
And leave it be. Because I'm not beating up on those guys individually. I'm just saying that, that a lot of people wanted people to feel good when they got, that piece of paper.
Right.
And I remember one of the first times that I had to write one of those, and I wasn't beating on the superintendent. I was actually, I was beating on the club for not, doing the right thing with their maintenance facility.
Yeah.
Which was an absolute shithole.
Right. Which never happens.
And yeah. And I'm like, and there's 2 guys in the committee who, are spending their time in Palm Springs and stuff. And, and they're just, they want all this spit and polish, right?
Right.
At their summertime club. They spend their winters on the perfect ryegrass and they want to come back to perfect. And it's not perfect in San Francisco. It's, foggy, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And it's like, listen, your superintendent's not the problem. This poor guy has just been working out of nowhere with nothing.
Yeah.
And that's because you guys want to be all low key and, chill, right? Because you're those captains of industry guys who are low key and chill. And, instead of driving, Porsches, you drive a Ford Explorer. Yeah, I get it. Right. That's what old money supposedly looks like. Well, old money thinking has made you, you're dealing with an antique situation here. It's not going to get you, if you want to get somewhere, this is not how to do it. Yeah. And so I write this report that basically says, you guys are blowing it with the management of your club. Do you think everybody felt good when they read that?
Probably not.
They're like, the superintendent says, this is great, Dave. This is exactly what I've been saying for 5 years.
Yeah.
And then they read my thing and then they suddenly go, oh, yeah, we need to build a maintenance facility and buy a bunch of new equipment. Yeah, let's do that.
What a novel idea.
And it wasn't, it wasn't very obvious. And so that's, that's honesty in an outside resource, can get you a long way.
For sure.
The other side of that is that I've had to grab a couple of those Mr. Hammersmiths, at a green committee meeting and say, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
XYZ club up the road did not do what you said they did.
Right.
And this place over here is not spending money like you say they are.
Yeah.
You're full of crap, dude. And you're just making this golf course superintendent's life miserable. And I don't understand why.
Well, and that goes to my point that it's a whole lot easier for a Dave Wilber to march in who's got an objective viewpoint. And is it going to cost you a little bit of money to have a guy like yourself come in and review things? Yeah. But you can say things that he could never say because he's got to come back to work the next day. Yeah. And I think that's a resource that maybe we've forgotten about in this industry, is just getting somebody from the outside that's got an objective viewpoint to assess things and help you out in that regard. And maybe it's not comfortable, but
it's never going to be.
That's okay.
That is never going to be comfortable. It's just not.
Yeah.
And if you think it's going to be easy, creating,
right.
You've been feeling the winds blow. Somebody's mentioned that maybe you ought to go. Okay. And now you want to call in, the resources. Well, the other side of that is there's going to be somebody on the other side who's spent time Googling whatever.
Yeah. Right.
Right. Because again, now, information is so available.
Yeah.
And oh gosh, you mean everything on the internet isn't true? Oh, shocking.
Good thing I was sitting down for that.
Yeah, but you guys will show up with that. I remember a guy whipping out his iPad at a green committee meeting and starting in on all the stuff that he had found about some particular subject,
Right.
And some of it was absolute bullshit.
And completely non-applicable.
Yeah, had nothing to do with the situation.
Yeah.
And yet, he found it on the internet. It must be true. And it must be useful. Oh.
So, along those lines, this was actually a very brilliant comment made by a superintendent. I was partially talking off the ledge this week, and he said, I kind of liken our jobs now to social media in regards that he said, as a superintendent, you can't read all the comments. Like somebody posts something on Twitter, and I don't know how many times I've done that, especially around election time. Don't read the comments. Don't read the comment. You read the comments, you idiot. You shouldn't have read the comments, right? And I just thought that analogy was absolutely spot on. Like, you've got 400 members, right? Don't read the comments.
Yeah.
That's what the governing body's supposed to do. And you're going to have some bad actors on the governing bodies as well, but you've got to have some kind of a plan in place so that you don't have to read the comments every day.
I remember a superintendent at a resort operation, I went to his office and he had a stack of comment cards, like from the hotel, sitting on his desk. And basically his boss had said, you need to read these.
Right.
Right. And some of it was super positive. So it was golf course oriented. It wasn't, hey, the bed at the resort was too soft or whatever. It was specific to the golf course.
Sure.
And some of it was positive. Greens were great, best greens I've ever put it on, whatever. And then some of them were just, this place is such a goat ranch.
Yeah.
And, how could you possibly charge the money that you're charging for conditions like this? Which the place was shiny.
This superintendent. Right? The superintendent isn't on the podcast right now, is he? I always had those stacks on my desk, and then I just let them fester there, and I throw.
Well, I wasn't specifically thinking about you, but you worked in one of those situations.
Yeah, absolutely.
This was actually, it was. I don't think you'd mind me saying it was Scott Macbeth at the Boulders, which is the first time I saw that.
I believe that.
And Scott had, comment cards on his desk. I'm like, what's this?
But he also had the personality, I think, that he could kind of shrug off some of that.
Oh, no, we laughed about it.
Yeah.
We sat there and read them. and
Scott was a rare one in that regard. Like he could,
and he could go talk to I'm trying to remember whoever I knew the GM at the time,
right?
And he was one of those GMs that you could go back to him with those cards and say, well, this is bullshit and this is maybe valid,
right?
Like if you would, if you want this done, we can do it. It's gonna cost this, or it's gonna mean this change or whatever. Like there's there were actually a couple of pretty valid things in there.
Sure.
There was a thing about some cactus that that was in the wrong spot, for a walk path.
And you kind of wonder if the GM even reviewed him before he just sent him down to Scott's office, right?
Oh, just if it had to do with golf.
Yeah. So put him in that pile. He gets
like, oh yeah, we can move that cactus. That's not a big deal. Doesn't need that cholla doesn't need to be there.
Right.
Just get it out of there.
Okay. So let's take a little. We've riffed beautifully.
This is apart.
Let's take a little bit of a side road for the time we've got remaining. Because I think this is, in my observation in the last few years, this has been a pitfall that a lot of superintendents have fallen into. And it's only served to add to their stress level and their workload. And that's in-house work, in-house renovation work.
I think we've talked about this a little bit on one of the podcasts, and I think
it's been an exceptional stressor for the last couple of years because most turf managers wanted to keep things moving forward during this, this completely unpredictable time that we've dealt with over the last few years. And so in order to do so, when things are tight, they would take on things that normally would have been contracted. So how do you say no?
Well, I'll tell you what, Kevin, I mean, just as a thought, I'd love it if you'd reach out to John O'Donnell from Heritage Golf and get him on your podcast.
Okay.
I think he would be an amazing guest, and I think you and he would have a great discussion.
Okay.
Because John has he has a turfgrass background. I mean, he worked at the Vintage Club with Jeff Marco, as an assistant, and then has been involved in construction, pretty deeply and really risen, up in the world.
Sure.
And Heritage Golf doesn't seem to have any problem doing renovation, restoration work, and sure, maybe somebody's going to say, well, he's going to say you should hire a contractor for everything, if it's more than 3 shovels full, hire a contractor. But I don't think that's what he would say. Right. I really don't.
Okay.
And I think especially as it comes down to labor, those guys can't find labor any more than we can.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, the construction world, I'm constantly hearing we can't find people.
Right.
We can't, and then imagine having to get them, out of town somewhere and put them up and having to go through those kinds of expenses.
Right.
I mean, it raises the price bar really high.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the best things that I've ever seen are when it's a combination, of some quality, talented golf course construction people.
Yeah.
Working alongside of some quality, talented A-grade greenkeepers.
And the superintendent's kind of the GC on the whole thing.
And the superintendent, and if there's a construction superintendent or whoever's working with the contractor or whatever, you get along really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get along good with the architect, have that kind of relationship like Jim Urbina had with so many of the supers that he works with and continues to work with. Where some days you're gonna point and pitch and it might get heated for a second, but everybody's on the same team for the same purpose. And at the end of the day, you crack a beer and say, well, that was tough, but we love each other.
Right.
Right. We're friends. Yeah. And I think when that goes on, there's no end to what can be done.
Yeah.
Right. But the worst thing, and again, this is part of that introvert kind of like, I can do anything golf course superintendent thing.
Yep.
Feel the pressure. Okay, they want a bunch of tees rebuilt. I've never rebuilt a tee. I've never leveled a tee.
Mm-hmm.
Or I've done very little of it. This is a lot bigger. I mean, don't, don't.
Well, and I think one of the other
that.
challenges I'm hearing a lot is, clubs that are kind of reacting to the windfall, if you will, of increased revenues or
Sure.
full memberships. We need to rebuild tees, and all of a sudden, every contractor in America is booked out 2 years.
Yeah.
And so that's when I'm hearing a lot of superintendents say, well, we'll do it ourselves. And he's already running 30% short on staff. And now you're going to take on a project like this. It's been the kiss of death for a lot of guys.
Yeah, it's a huge recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the things that we've learned over and over again, no matter how big or how small the job is, if you give them a date,
good point.
And that date is wrong.
Yeah.
All they're going to remember is that date.
Yep.
The first one that you give them. If you don't give them a date, then they think you're full of it and you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
It's a really tricky deal.
Yeah.
And you say, well, yeah, we should have that ready by June 1st. Come back to them, a month and a half later and say, well, it's probably going to be July.
It's one more nail in your coffin.
Yeah, and it's just putting your head in the noose.
Yeah.
And so that pre-planning, pre-project discussion, both for budget and for time, is invaluable. And you have to stand your ground and say, I'll figure this out, but I'm not just gonna, gee, how long do you think it will take us to rebuild 110 bunkers? You've never rebuilt 110 bunkers.
Right.
You don't know shit about what the labor or the sand market is all about. But you say, yeah, I think we can get that done, after Labor Day, between Labor Day and when it snows. How'd you come up with that?
Right.
Who'd you talk to? Don't.
But it goes right back to how we started this. It's controlling the narrative, right? You've got to control the conversation.
But that doesn't mean that you have to give out the information.
Correct.
One of the things that I've said to some superintendents is stop trying to teach Turfgrass 101 to everybody in every conversation.
Yep.
I
think I've shared this with you, and this goes back a number of years, but an individual who worked for me years past, way back, came to town on an interview, private club in the area, and he came into my office after the golf course tour, and he had a legal pad, and there were about 12 pages of notes. And he says, "This is really what I want to go over with the board in the formal interview." And I looked at him and I said, "They don't care about that. They want to know if you're the right guy for the job based on personality, based on, all these criteria. Agronomic understanding is not one of the criteria. They've assumed that." And I could have just as well punched him right in the gut, because he thought that's how he was going to lead. And I'm like, they don't care about that stuff, and you're going to get lost in it. So yeah, you're right. You can't give them everything, but you better control conversation.
I'm laughing because I got asked to be on an interview situation once. And the general manager, who was like a new GM,
as an interviewer,
I was on the committee.
Part of the committee.
I had been working with this club. The golf course superintendent took another job.
Okay.
There was a newer GM, and the committee guys, we all knew each other. It was good. The GM was, kind of the guy that we didn't know. And this dude, I don't know where I don't know what Club Managers Association book he opened. And here's how to interview a golf course superintendent. And he put out a thing that basically said, we need you to submit a draft, a budget.
Oh my God.
I'm talking about, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Give us your whole agronomic plan, a draft budget, right? And what I did in those situations is I had about 10 questions that we put out to prospective for them to write back.
Okay.
Just to see.
Sure.
Pretty simple stuff. So we had it down to who's going to actually come in for an actual interview. And Mr. General Manager wants all these things. Come to us with your golf course plan. These guys never seen the golf course.
Right. That's after you hire. That's the next step after you hire someone.
And so we just kind of ignored the guy, so then it's interview day, right? And first superintendent comes in and he's got, he's straight out of the GCSAA playbook. He's got, folders and
right
pictures of himself, and he's handing them out around the table. And there's numbers, and these guys are digging into this thing, and they're just all, wow, look at that, And then about 3 interviews in, and this is the guy who ended up getting the job. Okay, he doesn't have any of that stuff, and basically sits down and says, I wouldn't dream of doing that way.
Right, right.
And he points at me and he says, and he's your agronomic advisor. He knows more about grass than I do. Let's just keep him on. And, because the guy knew me. And he's like, I'm not doing a budget for a piece of property I've never seen. I don't know why you guys asked for that.
Yeah.
Right. And he was just straight up about it. And he got the job. Right. And the coat and tie guys who had the folders and stuff, one of them came to me and said, why didn't I get, my package was perfect. And I said, had you ever been to the property before you wrote all that up? Well, no, but I know how to run a golf course. Oh, okay.
A golf course.
Sir, listen, you're a great guy.
Yeah.
And this is partly why I didn't get involved in a lot of search stuff or being because you're one person's friend and everybody else hates you because they didn't get the job, right?
Sure.
And this was a semi-friend who didn't get the job who's like, well, I did everything right. So, I think in our world right now, you've got to be so far ahead of those kinds of things in your thinking, right? This is where we were getting at, I think, is it's gone way beyond the age old, tell us what your salary requirement question is, or the interview ends. There's so much more to it.
Yeah.
I mean, really, honestly, if these guys have any internet savvy or whatever, they can probably go out and find a lot about your history.
Right.
Yeah. They can get on Golf Club Atlas and find out if anybody's been yapping about the work you did or didn't do.
Yeah.
Things like
Good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
I don't know. That was kind of a roundabout way to just say that, that there is a lot of prep work and a lot of thinking that has to go into, how you're going to present yourself, who you're going to present yourself as, and all those sorts of things.
And as much of it has to do with reading the interviewer or the member once you're on the job, as it does, the actual understanding of the issues that you have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Okay.
So, all right. I told you we were going to end on a light note.
Yeah,
we're at time. So a while back, I did a.
Is this the part of the Joe Rogan thing where we talk about how scared we are of bears?
You're clearly not scared of bears.
Or
there's one right behind you. Don't turn around real quick.
Right. Or no, is this where we talk about aliens or the world being flat and stuff? Is that where you
No, I don't think we're going to get into aliens because they're all around us clearly. So let's not even talk about that. Just keep your head in the sand. A while back, I did something, and it was probably as close to crowdsourced podcasts as I've ever done, where I just asked for all the crazy, because there isn't a superintendent or a turf manager out there that hasn't had some bizarre experience or something that happened to them on the golf course or happened to the golf course. And with your travels and all the places you've been, there's had to have been a story or two that you could spend the next couple of minutes just kind of, if it's just one, what's the craziest thing you've seen on a golf course?
The craziest thing I've seen,
because this has been a heavy conversation.
It has.
We got to end it up a little lighter.
My head hurts, and that's okay. Oh man, I mean, as far as like when I was working on the golf course, should we go there?
I don't care. Whatever.
Well, I mean,
I'll tell you one of mine that I forgot to talk about on the podcast.
Okay, I have one, but I want to hear yours.
So it came up in a Twitter conversation maybe about a month ago, where somebody was all pissed off because somebody in the middle of the night had come by and cut a flag off the flag stick. And I commented on that, you know, because you could tell the superintendent was not happy. And I said, you know, that happened to me on the floating green at Coeur d'Alene Resort. We did a lot of wedding functions, and there was a Navy SEAL that had gotten married on the lawn down by the water. And, you know, of course, all his buddies in the SEALs, they got drunk and they had to capture the flag event. So they swam out, and I found this out later. They swam out to the floating green,
island green,
and the first one to cut the flag off and bring it back to shore won the contest or whatever. I'm sure it was more shots or whatever, but I didn't hear about it until I talked to somebody in the catering department. They said, dude, it was the funniest dang thing I've ever seen. These guys stripped down, you know, they all had their dress uniforms on. They stripped down to their skivvies and swam out like it was a freaking Iron Man event or something.
It's probably cold water and
yeah, exactly right. But they're SEALs, so it's fine.
Yeah.
All right, what's yours?
Well, there's a couple. A lot of my best golf course stories have to do with Mike Kozak.
Yeah.
In my first years working with Mike, he was the first superintendent I worked for at Pole Creek Golf Club in Colorado, and subsequently I was one of his assistants on a grow-in job on a Warrish-Weisskopf deal in Southern Colorado. And so you know, I worked for Mike for several summers, and then I went, you know, I was in, you know, getting my turfgrass degree.
Right.
And Mike got hired to be the super on a Warrish-Weisskopf deal in Southern Colorado. And so I was going to go work for him. You know, it was almost like doing my internship, but the Kozak method was to have like nobody on the staff.
Right.
You know, there's like 4 of us.
Yeah.
Growing it. Wadsworth is building the thing. There's 4 of us that are going to grow this thing in. And it was just immensely hard work. And I didn't care because I love that guy so much. And I love the situation. And oh my God, I get to meet Tom Weisskopf, and this is all good.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
How exciting. So we're starting to get equipment in, you know, and again, Mike's super old school. You know, we're going to mow with nationals, right?
We're going to, sure, of course.
We're going to grow in mower. The ultimate grow in mower is a national. So we get these nationals with.
I don't know that that's incorrect, to be honest.
It's not incorrect. It's not incorrect at all.
Those things were bulletproof.
Yeah, and it's and they had like, you know, ATV tires on the back.
Right. Right.
You know, so they wouldn't get stuck. And you know, pretty interesting developer who ended up, you know, kind of going bankrupt, but that's another story. And so Mike decides that we've got 3 nationals. So we're going to ride the nationals in the 4th of July parade.
In town.
Right?
Okay.
Show up as the golf course superintendent. And literally the nationals got delivered like they were brand new, hadn't mowed a blade of grass yet.
Perfect.
We're gonna drive these nationals in the parade, you know, in Levita, Colorado. And we're gonna do like the Shriners thing where we might do the 3-man weave.
Right, the 3,
you know.
right.
This is all good. Now look, the national.
What could go wrong?
The Briggs and Stratton motor on a national is very air cooled.
Yeah. Out front, burning the inside of your calves.
And the clutch on a national, I know I'm really dating myself, but you know what I'm getting at here.
I'm
right?
tracking.
You put the lever in, and it kind of engaged this funky clutch situation, and you know, and it would go.
Yep.
There's another lever. I don't, you know.
And it wasn't so much a clutch as an on-off lever, right? I mean, it was in.
It basically just put the flywheel against the motor.
Yeah.
Kind of thing, which turned a shaft, which.
Right.
I mean, it's as rudimentary as you get.
Yeah.
So we start into the 4th of July parade, and of course it's the parade. You're waiting, you know. And we get going, you know, and we're behind the horses or whatever, you know, so there's horse shit in the street.
You've never told me this story, by the way.
And I don't think I've told anybody this story. And we're gonna do the 3-man weave on the, you know, it was me and the irrigation guy and one of our people. Mike was not on the
right. You got assigned to this deal.
And And we get about halfway through the thing and the clutch just starts to fuck up on all three of these units.
On all of them.
Because they come out of adjustment in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And they're not a big deal to adjust, but you don't like
adjust. You're not doing it in a parade.
4th of July parade.
Yeah.
Suddenly the fucking Nationals are not going. Right? Okay. And then the Briggs and Stratton motors are starting to overheat.
Yeah, because it's the 4th of July.
The heat coming off the motor. And we end up pushing these damn things down the street
in the parade
for like half the parade. The clutches made it for about half the parade, and then we're and the motors are overheating, and so it's just like, okay, we'll just shut it down. And so we literally pushed 3 Nationals halfway through the 4th of July parade. And of course, Mike, I think he was driving in his pickup behind us because the pickup had like the Grandotti Golf on the pickup. And so he's watching all this go down. Right. And he's embarrassed. So we get to the end of the parade thing. And we used to call him the Tasmanian Devil. Because when he really let go, it was for real, and the key thing was the hat went back.
Like backwards.
No. If he put his thumb under the hat and pushed it back,
oh no,
life was about to get really interesting. Mike was tazzing out at that point. We called it.
Jeez.
And we get to the end of the parade thing, and we've got these Nationals. Has anybody got a 9/16 wrench so we can adjust this clutch? And he walks up to me and he says, I want you to call the distributor, whoever the distributor was in Denver, and tell him to come pick these fucking things up. Pieces of shit that are going back. We're not paying for these things. He's just losing his mind, right? How embarrassing and all that stuff. And I'm just worn out from having to deal with
from pushing a National up a parade route.
Our 2 other employees are just laughing their asses off. They're just thinking, Mike is losing his mind. You call those sons of bitches and tell them to come get these goddamn things. And sorry about the language, but I mean, that was our world. And
I don't know how we're going to edit all this, but it's for artistic flourish, right?
It's all bad. I know. And so, we're sitting there and it's like, well, now what do we do? Right? Because we had driven these things from the golf course.
Oh my gosh.
To the parade thing. So so we're trying to put them back together. And I think it took us about 2 hours to go about, 5 miles because we had to stop and readjust things. And, and one of the motors finally we melted one of the Briggs and Stratton motors in that whole deal.
No kidding.
Which I don't know why would it melt on the street and not on the turf grass? Because later those Nationals would run all day.
Yeah.
So the coolness of the grass, I have no idea. I think it was just a bad motor to begin with, or didn't.
Yeah, it must have been.
I don't even know that we had a chance to check the oil in the things. They literally had just gotten off the truck.
Jeez.
So that was one Kozak thing. And my other big story, my other Bull Creek story, which I think I've written this a little bit, was I had a girlfriend, and we, this is my senior year. It was after my senior year in high school, and I was dating this girl whose family spent time in the summer in Colorado. They were from Dallas, right? Her dad was a doctor. He hated me. I'm a greenkeeper kid. Come on.
Right. This is not what I had planned for my daughter.
And but anyway, she and I routinely would go out to the golf course at night because it was pretty, and I knew my way around, and we'd hang out, make out, whatever.
Right.
And we're hanging out. It was pretty innocent, really. And we're hanging out. We're sitting on the putting green at Bull Creek Golf Course, and it was like a big putting green, and so we had 690 sprinkler heads.
Sure. Yeah.
Around it, right?
Yeah.
And
cannons.
A Toro 690 is a cannon.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of laying there stargazing, talking, whatever.
Uh-huh. Right.
And the 690 goes off right next to us. Right. And it just direct shots both of us.
Ugh.
Right. And in the process of getting up and trying to deal with whatever, I squarely hit her in the nose with my elbow and broke her nose.
Oh my gosh.
And she's bleeding and
no.
crying and she's half knocked out, you know?
Ugh.
So I get her gathered up and I had a Ford F-150 pickup. I get her in the pickup, right? And I'm like, what are we going to do? You know, because like, I mean, she's bleeding, you know, like her nose is broken. And, oh, I guess, you know, I don't know, you know, so all I can think is maybe we'll go, my house wasn't far down the road. So we'll go to my house and my mom will know what to do or whatever. Right.
Right.
So we're driving out the entrance road of the golf course. And as we're driving out, this happened. It's shocking. There's a Grand County Sheriff's Office car coming the other direction.
Somebody reported somebody on the green.
No. He was in his usual patrol, you know, probably once a night. He just kind of drove through that road. And he's looking down, you know, at something. And we're coming around this corner and he's coming right for me. No, he didn't see us until.
Well, who's going to be on the road at that time of the night? That's probably what he's thinking, right?
Exactly. And there's this, and, you know, I can see that he's looking down, and there's this kind of deep barrow ditch. So I get over on the side, and the shoulder's soft, and the pickup just goes down into the ditch, right? And nobody's wearing any seatbelts. This is 1984,
right?
You know? And she hits the dashboard.
Oh no!
Right, and she's even more kind of messed up. The sheriff's officer realizes what he's done. He stops his car. He comes running over. He pulls the door open. He looks. He sees blood and her up against the dashboard. And he's freaking out. Oh my God, I can't believe that happened. You know, gathers her up, gathers me. I hit this. I took a.
Wait, why are you two soaking wet?
Yeah, right. And I took a big old bite out of the steering wheel, right? So I was kind of messed up.
Right.
Like, it's a wonder I didn't lose any teeth. And he loads us both up into the sheriff's car and drives the 4 miles to the clinic. He's on the radio, you know, I have an emergency kind of thing.
This is your cover. This is perfect. Everything's going according to plan.
No, because I'm like, well, you know, what are we going to say to her mom? Her dad wasn't in town. Her mom, you know, like,
right.
And she's saying, what, you know, how's this all going to go? And my dad had this gets even worse. My dad had a police scanner that he sat and listened to.
Oh no.
Okay. Because he just liked that. And because he drove the ambulance a little bit, but so he hears about all this and somehow they end up saying my name. Okay. So he thinks I've been in a bad accident. And this cop is going lights and siren to the clinic, which is just
because he knows it's his fault.
So my father jumps in his truck and is hauling ass down there. He and my mom, right? Because my kid might be dead,
right?
You know, they're running. And this whole thing happens, and my mom realizes that that I'm with I was with my girlfriend, and they're saying that there were 2 people in the accident. So she calls girlfriend's mom.
Okay.
So all the parents arrive about the same time. And I'm trying to tell the story. And her mom decides that what really happened is that I hit her daughter.
Right.
And we're trying to cover it up.
Of course.
Right. I gave her a black eye or whatever. And it's just getting, you abuse my daughter. It's just getting worse and worse, And finally we kind of get everybody straightened out, and then everybody starts to laugh. Because the whole story comes out, and the cop is saying, "Yeah, I ran him off the road," and all that sort of stuff, and he's all upset, and he's like, "We'll call a tow truck. We'll get no." And all I can think at this point, if Mike Kozak finds out about any of this, he's gonna Taz out. I am done. I am absolutely done. And so I said to my dad, I said, "We got to go get the truck, man. Like, we got to go pull the truck out of the ditch."
Well, you were just checking the irrigation set. She just happened to be tagging along.
Yeah. Oh, whatever. So that wasn't my job.
I tried.
Yeah, right. So we go and we pull the truck out of the ditch, and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, there's all these marks, and trying to kind of stomp them all down or whatever, and not. And so we had the end of the year crew party a few days later, and she came with me. It was like we had a barbecue kind of thing, and her nose,
black eye and white tape and the whole deal, right?
Yeah, her eyes are all black. It's like, what happened? Oh, nothing, all that sort of stuff. And Mike never really asked me anything. I think I might have shared the story with one of the crew members, which was probably really stupid.
Yeah,
to do that. And years later, like we're talking. This is 15 years later. And he goes, "Remember that night you broke your girlfriend's nose at the golf course?" I had no idea he even knew. And I'm like, "What? You know about that?" Yeah, I knew everything.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I should have fired you, but it's too funny.
Should have fired you. Of course you should have.
And I'm like, "Well, how did you know?" Right? Because I'm thinking, from one of the golf course guys. No, my mom had told me. He ran into my mom at the grocery store.
Oh.
And she told him, she's talking to him about the whole thing.
The beauty of the small town, right?
And I'm like, I hate this place. I need to leave
that's
here.
too funny. Well, that's a good way to end.
Oh, anyway, that's a long story of like one of the craziest nights ever. And it's like, and ever since I've been deathly afraid of Toro 690s.
I don't blame you.
That noise of that thing popping up and then the drive hitting is just, it's well,
not too many places you have to hear that sound anymore.
You don't see them anymore.
Yeah. Well, typically we try to go for an hour, and I know we've gone over, but I don't think anybody's logged off. These are all worthwhile conversations, and like I said at the beginning, I was a little nervous about just riffing, but boy, that riffed pretty well. So I appreciate your insights, and hopefully at least one person listening gets a little something out of it, because it's a tough business that hasn't gotten any easier. But
our business is tough, and it's real. And I think I get a little bit frustrated when everybody's sort of singing, the birds singing, flowers blooming, everything going great.
Yep.
Scene. I know that happens for some superintendents. I admire that so much,
Yeah.
But the trenches are not pretty.
Sometimes. No, and those that have reached out to the two of us or others, I think I certainly appreciate being included in the conversation, and it's an honor to walk through stuff with people, and
now that mental health and all these
don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, it's these are important conversations. They're conversations we couldn't have 10 years ago.
That's right.
Nobody would be that open.
Yeah. Well, Dave, Wilber, thanks again for joining me, and we could probably do this every week and just riff
my honor, my pleasure, Kevin.
Riff our butts off. We get to see each other this week, so I'll be in Denver for an academy on Tuesday, and
I've been directed to show up for dinner. I love it.
Yeah, looking forward to it. So, thanks again for your time, and thanks everybody for hanging on for a little bit extra time, but hopefully it was worth your time in the end. So appreciate everybody listening, and don't forget to subscribe if you get an opportunity, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks.